Hi, Andreas from Toddle here, and today we're going to learn about building dynamic websites with APIs, or application programming interfaces. So you're probably familiar with user interfaces, which is how users interact with applications. An application programming interface, or an API, is how two applications interact with each other. And the most common case, and the one we'll be covering today, is where a client, in this case our Toddle application, will send a request to a server for some information, for some data, and the server will then return a response with that information that's been requested. So now I'm here on my Toddle dashboard, and I want to create a new project. I'm going to pick the blank template, and I think the emoji I want for this is... we are going to pick a turtle, and we're going to call it Turtle News. It's going to be a site with just news about turtles. So now our project is ready, and we are going to go and edit the dev branch. Right. So first off, I think we're going to change our heading to Turtle News. And I think the subtitle here, we're going to keep that and call it Hard-Hitting Journalism. Journalism about our favorite reptiles. I can't spell very well. Favorite reptiles. That's pretty good. I'm liking that. So now, in order to actually get some news content onto our site, because we want this page to show the most relevant turtle news of today, we could, of course, just go and find something and post it in, but then we would manually have to update it every day. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to add an API that fetches turtle news from a public sort of facing API. And then we're going to take all that data we get back, and we're going to render it onto the app, right? Onto our Toddle application. So I need to find a place where I can get some news data for my page. I'm going to open a new tab and go to newsdata.io. And so this is an API that lets you fetch worldwide news, and you can enter in a topic here, a keyword that you want to follow. And in my case, it is turtles. And then after that, I just want to take this language param here, like option here, and change that to English only and apply that. So that gives me the latest news that are related to the word turtle, right? And we got some nice, lovely news here about turtles being returned to the wetlands. So that's exactly what we're looking for. And I've already signed up to an account for news data. And that's why here you can see it includes my, my API key in this request. So that's perfect. That means we're ready to go. If you want to build something with news data, you can sign up for a free account. And then when you're on the site and do the search, it's automatically going to include everything you need here. So I'm just going to copy this API right here, this API URL. And then I'm going back to my Toddle editor. Now I'm going to go to the data tab. And here I want to add a new API. And I'm going to need turtle news. And then here inside the URL, I'm going to replace that with the URL from my turtle news. There's a little thing, the URL, the turtle news seems to include a space in front of the URL when you copy it from their site. So you just have to remove that first. And that's all we need to do, because this URL included everything the API needed. In a later video, we're going to go into we're going to go much more in depth with APIs when we look into authenticated applications. So we'll cover a lot more what some of these other things in our API panel does. But for now, this is all we need to actually get the data. So I'm going to say done. And now I actually have all the data from the Turtle API loaded up in Toddle. Actually, let's go back and have a look, because we can see here on the right side that we get our response. And we can actually see what data we got back from the Turtle API. We can see that little preview here. So anything inside data, we got our response first, and then we got the data right here. And that data includes, first of all, the a status saying there was a success. So this data is what is returned from the API. Total number of results that are listed here. I don't know if it's a total. We can see if it's a total number of results or how many are actually here. I think it's the amount of results we got that they're available in total, but it's probably, no, we actually only get the first 10 here, right? So it's saying there are actually 23 results for Toddle News within the last 48 hours, which is what the API returns. But I'm only showing you the first 10 here. So it's only showing me the first 10 results. And that's inside this result. Then for each result, we can see we get a title. We get a link to the page that has the news article. We get some keywords. I think we get a creator who wrote it. Potential video URL, which is null, so that's not here. We get description. The content, that's probably going to be the full description. I think often it's going to be the short version, of course, content being the full article. When it was published, and then an image URL, and then a source ID, which seems to be like how they identify news sources. So there's a lot of information here. And for every API, the data you get back is different, and it could be structured different. So you can't always predict that something is going to be results, and it could be items or however that API decides to return the data. But when we're calling the news data API, this one, we can see how this looks. And it's really good to have a look at your data, see how is it structured, how do I need to access this in my application, right? So now that we got this here information, and we can see how it's structured, let's start adding some elements to our page that actually take data from that API, right? So we're going to go back here to our elements view, and we're going to add a new, I think we're going to first add a new section called main here, right? So the main section is usually where the main important content of your website lives, right? So we're going to add that in. And then below that, we have this nice card component in Toddle that I think we're going to repurpose for this, right? So we're going to add in a card. Now, there's a few things about the card that I'm not. First of all, let's just add a little bit of margin to the top of this. There we go. And there's a few things about the card that I like. There's also a few things that maybe aren't quite here yet. So let's, first of all, I don't think the width of 50 is enough. So let's add a bit more. Now the image is not so happy. So we're going to cut that height out so it'll automatically refit. And I think actually the same thing with the card. We don't really want to constrain it on height. We just want to let it flow, right? And then maybe we add a little bit of gap between the different sections. There we are. I think maybe one was too much there. There we go. So that looks pretty good. That looks much better to me. And I'm kind of liking the dark theme of the card. So I think I'm going to incorporate that throughout my website. Big fan of dark mode. So we're going to go and change the title on our text here as well. Not background here. There we are. I'm liking that. So now we've got a card. And of course, this is not representing any data we have. This is just kind of like the UI placeholder. So what we want to do now is for every single news result in our data, so in here, right, Toddle News, for every single item in our results we get back, we want to render one of these cards. And then afterwards, when we've done that, we're going to swap out the image to be the news image, the image we got from the news site. We're going to swap out the title and, of course, the description down here. And then I think this large button is going to be linking. We're actually going to swap that out with a link to the news source, right? Okay. So we want to go into our elements and then find this section. So this section sort of wraps our whole card, right? And we want to repeat this section for every single news story in the data set we got back from the API. And the way we do that is by something we call repeat. So we can right click here and choose repeat from this little menu, or we can select it here and then over here on attributes, you'll see repeat. And the way this works is that you provide it with an array of data, and then for every item in that array, that element will be repeated. So we need to, here in our formula, to go and access that array. And if you haven't seen our formula editor before, this is it. This allows you to sort of specify some specific data you want out of it, given all the data available at the time. So in this case, I'll show you what that means. If we go and change the current formula, we can sort of open up our formula selector here. And immediately we can see a lot of the data we have access to. So right here, the thing we care about is our API Toddle News, right? And if we click on Toddle News, we can see that it shows us the little box that says, okay, but inside Toddle News, we have this data, right? And we want to pick data in this case. And then we know that our actual results are inside results. So we're going to click that one. And then here we get a list of all the results. And when we're repeating, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for an array of all our results here. So now we're done defining our formula. And see, what the formula does here says, well, you've got all this data available, includes the API. Specifically, what I need is the results. So this formula specifies that it needs just the results for this formula to function, right? You can just press escape to exit that. And now when we see, we can just enter test mode here. And now we can see, now we've got a lot of cards on our page here, right? They're repeating for every element for every item in the results we get back. But they don't have the right data, right? They're still just the standard image. They're still saying heading. They're still saying this text paragraph. So we haven't actually provided with any of the data inside the list items, just the actual, the fact that it needs to repeat. So the next thing we need to do is we're going to take this heading. And this actually, in our context, shouldn't be a heading 4. So I'm going to quickly up here change it to a H2. And then this text inside, we want to bind this text to be the title of the specific item we're currently repeating over. And we can do that similar to what we did with repeat by saying, well, here's the little formula icon for the text. We're going to click that. And now when we open up our formula select, we can see some new information. So we always had this Toddle News, but now we also have these repeat item. And we got an item and index. And this item is the item we repeated over when we repeated the whole section, right? So in this case, if I start by picking this is then going to provide us all that information that was available from our API inside each item. And I can choose the title. And for the first element, for the first section, this title is going to be the first item in the data from our API and the title from that. But for the next one, it's then going to get the item here is going to refer to the next one, right? And so on and so forth. So each item now gets, if we go back to test mode and just press T to go to test mode. So now we can see we get the first title here, but the next card gets a different one because that's the next item in our list. And so on and so forth. So now we got the titles in, right? We can do exactly the same right here with the paragraph, with the description. So we're getting our item and then description. So now we've got the descriptions for each item going, yeah. And I also want to add the image. So here we pick the image, we select the image element, and then we go and say, well, I don't want this source to be the standard Toddle image. I want to set that also using a formula. So you click this little formula icon again. And then in here, again, we're picking the repeat item because all this should be based on what item are we currently repeating over. And then here, there's an image URL. And what we can notice here is that it says null. And null is sort of means there is no value, right? It's an empty value, is called null. So there is none here. And that's true for the first item, but it's not going to be true for all of them. So some of these articles are going to have images, some of them are not. And when we go out, we can sort of see that here. So this image is broken, but this one has a nice picture of a turtle, and then we have one that doesn't have one, and then unfortunately one, okay, that's a very sad news for turtle news. That was not quite what we were looking for here. But we can see some of them have images, some of them don't. And I think the way we want to handle that is we want to say, well, if there is an image, show the image. If you don't have an image, we'll just not show that image element at all. And if we select the image element here, right, we can see right next to repeat, we have this show. And we can set that formula. So I'm going to go and I'm going to pick my repeat item again. And then I'm going to take my image URL. And the way show works is that you give it a formula. And if it says this is what we call a truthy value, then it'll show the element, otherwise it won't. And a truthy value is any value that's not actually false or null. So false and null means it's not truthy. Anything else is like, okay, we'll show it. So in this case, we have the image URL is null, and that means it'll not be shown. But what we're seeing here is that it's not shown for the ones where the image was broken, but for everywhere where there was an image, we're still seeing it, right? So that's how we can use show to sort of toggle elements on and off based on some dynamic information. In this case, whether the image is there or not, right? Now, just because the styling annoys me a bit here, I'm going to go into main and just add a little bit of a gap here. Just it looks a little bit nicer when it has some spacing between, right? Okay, so we're almost there, right? We're doing pretty good for our Turtle News app, I think. What I want to change here is that this button should now actually link to the news site that we want, right? So in order to do that, we're actually going to get rid of the button because buttons and links are two different things. I still like the style of it. I don't mind that it looks like a button, but it shouldn't actually be a button element. So I'm going to take that out, and then I'm going to add in here a link instead, right? And we'll start by making it work, which is we need to change the link, or the A tag here, is that called in HTML. We're going to change that source attribute. Sorry, not source, href, which is how links work in the browser. You need to change its href attribute to be the actual website we should be linking to. And just like we did with the paragraph and with the title and with the image source, we're going to click our little formula icon. We're going to pick out the repeat item. And then here, I think it was called link. Right. We should probably change the text here. And I think we're just going to make that a static saying, read the article. So we could go ahead and style this link. I'm actually happy with it, to be honest. I don't think it needs to be. I don't think we need to style it. Maybe we'll float it right. So let's add a container in here. And we'll just change this to be like that. So we're just making sure it's flowing in a row direction and then realigning it right instead, because I think that looks pretty good. So let's see. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So that's sort of us doing the Turtle News site. Let's go and preview it. So we go to our project settings and click preview. And now we have our Turtle News site. It's loading all that good, hard-hitting turtle journalism that we want to see. Feels like a lot of these things are not really the, not quite the sort of happy-go-lucky news I was looking for. Maybe I was a bit optimistic when I chose Turtle News. But anyway, the site is working. And if we click on read the article, we'll be taken on to the actual news site that published it. So that's how you can use APIs in Toddle to actually get dynamic content and make sure that that page reacts to what the data you get back. And the key thing here is how we set up a new API using APIs in the data panel. And then we use the data from that API first to repeat these cards. So we use the Pete formula here. And then we used it to insert the specific data into all of these elements. And that works for text. It works for different kind of attributes. It works all over the place, right? I really hope you're going to try this out. I would love to see what you build. I quite like the news data AI API. So you could absolutely use that. And there's a lot more things you can build. I only scratched the surface of what's possible with that API. So please go and try it out in Toddle. Build a dynamic site. Share it with the world, and especially share it with us on our Discord. We love seeing what people build. We got more videos like this coming out. We're going to go much more in depth with formulas. We're going to talk about how events and workflows let you build interactive applications in Toddle. And we're also going to go much more in depth with authenticated APIs, all the different things that you can do with APIs once you're working with different kind of backends. So if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, I recommend doing that now. We've got videos coming out a lot, especially this month. So don't miss it. And thank you very much for your time.